Welcome everybody. Shall we get this party started? Who is the MDB? What exactly do they do? Shall we find out?
The Municipal Demarcation Board was established in 1999 as an independent authority responsible for the determination and redeterminations of municipal boundaries. In addition to this, the board is also mandated by legislation to declare the district management areas, to delimit wards for local elections, and to assess the capacity of municipalities to perform their functions. The main aim of the MDB is to integrate communities, to plan and resize municipal boundaries, thus ensuring that all South Africans can access services and be afforded equal opportunities. The current board faces new challenges as our democracy rapidly matures as public knowledge and expectation increase. This necessitates doing things differently and focusing on matters that affect people in different groups and societies. The board intends to invest in more public engagement, which has already begun, and this is only the beginning of a changed perspective on how the public will become more involved in the work of the MDB.
Now that we know a little bit more about the MDB and its function, I think it's time for us to take a closer look about what it is exactly that they do. And for that, I'm going to need a few key people. So, what is the vision of the MDB board?
To be, the leading spatial and knowledge hub.
The board has got an ambition to be an information hub on demarcation issues.
The board has to occupy its center stage in gathering and analyzing data that is spatially related in order to assist ourselves towards decision making in terms of boundary determinations and redeterminations, but as well as assisting all stakeholders within the local government sector as they execute on their mandated responsibilities.
Its main mandate revolves around municipal boundary determinations, capacity assessments, and ward delimitations.
So, who are these stakeholders? And what does all of this mean? Take these question marks away from me.
We have quite a number of stakeholders. Key amongst them and central is the public. Now we do have other stakeholders like municipalities are our stakeholder, the provinces, provincial departments of cooperative governance. We do have Stats SA on whom we rely upon for a lot of information that informs board's decisions, like your statistical data. The Independent Electoral Commission is one of our key stakeholder and client in that, particularly for ward delimitation, we have to undertake ward delimitation within a time that allows a handover to the IEC in order for them to prepare for local government elections, meaning that if we don't do our work on time, we are impacting on how they will ultimately do their work. We need to play a role that is transformational. A spatial transformation in the country has to be led by the board as one of the key institutions as we redress the injustices created by the spatial reorganization that was created during the apartheid era. We're trying to say that we are aware that the current triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment are no means a coincidence, but they are largely spatially engineered. And unless we address spatial transformation, we may not, despite how much money you invest in this, you may not be able to redress this. So spatial transformation has to be very much central in the transformation of the local government sector.
So, how has the changing of the board affected the operations of the MDB?
There is a trend that indicates the way challenges as the board went on implementing its mandate, particularly when it comes to, integration of societies, integration of settlements, integration of economies. On the economic side, there would have been resistance, or there has been resistance to integration by those who felt that by integrating them with certain settlements, you're bringing in a burden. You're integrating us with areas that are too backward, and they're going to become a burden on our tax base. They're going to start sharing with the benefits that we benefits out of the space that we have created, where we live in harmony and have created our infrastructure.
This is all well and good, and I can see that this is something that really needs to happen. Godwa, I can't help but wonder, Uguti, whenever there is spatial transformation, merging, and separation of municipalities, these are the things that are not taken lying down, especially by the communities that are involved.
People forgot that much as you could be the like of Johannesburg, and you look at yourself in relation to Alexander to say, oh, if you bring in this to be integrated with us as a single municipality, then we are going to be sharing with these people who may not even be capable to pay for services, for example. And yet you forget that the very people who live on the other side are contributing tremendously towards the development of that very area that looks so developed. And as part of the board's mandate, we're saying that we need to make sure that people are able to benefit out of the tax base within which they contribute. Now, people contribute, they live here, they commute daily to the other side to contribute in terms of their labor. They earn money and even spend it there and go back to their spaces, having spent all they have on the other side. So they contributed tremendously towards building the economy, the infrastructure, whatever you have on the other side, and yet there is reluctance to just incorporate them and having them then benefiting out of the tax base within which they are making such contribution.
If you look at the impact of apartheid spatial engineering and the consequence of the social consequence of that, you're finding not only amongst traditional leaders and people living in traditional areas, it's in all areas, colored, Indian, African, white areas and things like that, where people prefer to stay together because they've developed a new culture, subculture, as a result of the Group Areas Act. And so how do you take a colored community, let's talk about Cape Town, let's take a part of a colored community and link them with part of an African community when the issues of racism between coloreds and Africans is an issue, right? It's there to be seen in the Western Cape and things like that. Because of the impact of apartheid, do you pander to that? Do you say, well, okay, fine, whites and coloreds and Africans don't get along, so we keep you separately in your wards or your municipalities? Or do you say, engineer the thing and say, well, tough luck, apartheid did that, we're not going to perpetuate apartheid, you've got to find a way to work together.
This trend of other communities wanting to be kept separate from other municipalities and communities is not only an inner city problem. Let's hear how rural South Africa is responding.
I support Metro for these two following reasons: economy development or economy upgradation. For example, if I come here from where I stay, I spend 42 rand a day. But if the metro can be introduced, the accessibility of the transport will be implemented to our place. It will be very easy for us, like for instance, Reavaya to be implemented and other means of the transportation. And the other reason that I'm having is human settlement. Every day, because we are from the squatter camp, we just sleep in the colded shacks, whereas our neighbors are sleeping in the mansion, those who are denying the metro to be introduced. In other words, I will politely ask the opposers of the metro to look the issue of the metro with a brilliant eye that it will cover everyone. Because this district municipality just cover a certain portion of people. But metro, it will be for all. And I still saying I'm supporting metro to be the Western to become the metro.
On the rural side, you found that the trend had been that there are people who who have found themselves comfortable in how the apartheid regime had defined them. You are this tribe, you are this ethnic group, and you become so comfortable being that, and you don't want to be integrated with other black people as long as they don't belong to you, or, you know, they are not of the same ethnicity or tribal affiliation. Those had been the challenges with the board executing its mandate over the years, just to get this integration being acceptable. As one of the key pillars of nation building, of course, we have to have that done as we integrate our people, saying we are one nation.
So we have heard some of the challenges that the previous boards have dealt with and faced. Kotwa, let's find out what are some of the challenges that the current board is dealing with.
The current challenges are brought about by the fact that this board is the board that has dealt with the ward delimitation and outer boundary determination simultaneously. It has never happened. And this came about because the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Minister Pravin Gordhan, approached the board and presented a proposal requesting us to have the certain boundaries reconfigured in order to make municipalities more viable and able to execute on their mandate. And that made it necessary that we have to run with the dual processes, ward delimitation and outer boundary determination at the same time.
Now, out of interest, I wonder, Uguti, does the MDB ever get accused of political interference? Because I can see how the work that the board does can easily get misconstrued as gerrymandering. Now you're asking yourself, what is gerrymandering? Lalel, here's the definition from the dictionary. It is to manipulate boundaries of electoral constituencies so that they can favor one class or party. Got it? Good. Let's keep it moving.
What we had faced is that the public would see this as gerrymandering, to say, oh, what is it the minister is asking you to do? Is it somehow interfering with boundaries as we move towards local government elections? Some even challenging us in courts to say you don't even have to accept or even entertain this proposal. And yet, legally, we had to entertain the minister's proposal. And entertaining it doesn't mean saying yes. It says we will look at this proposal, test it against the criteria as set out in the law, and come out with our own, independent conclusion on his proposal.
We do get a lot of people out there who don't understand the ward delimitation process itself. That is why in this particular round of ward delimitations, we consciously as the board decided that we're going to start, before we can do anything, we're going to start with what we call public awareness campaign. After we finalized the municipal boundaries, we started at a national level where we invited all the stakeholders, explained the processes of ward delimitation. The intention there was also for them to assist us when they go back to also convey the same messages to the communities. After that, we then focused at a provincial level. We invited almost similar structures at a provincial level where we explained and kind of provided knowledge on ward delimitation, how ward delimitation is supposed to be handled by different, what is the role of the communities.
You have to make sure that this public is taken on board. This public is given an opportunity to air its views. This public has to know why boundaries have to change every 5 years, for example, in terms of ward delimitation, because they ask those questions. So we need to more and more make this information available for them so that they do understand, they take part actively in the ward, in the boundary determination processes. Their input gets to be taken into consideration by the board so that ultimately the wards, the boundaries that they sit within are the boundaries that they had crafted themselves.
So, why do the boundaries need to change every 5 years, you might ask yourself?
The formula that is driving ward delimitation is based on the number of registered voters. It says that the number of registered voters will change each time there's going to be an election, when it will be driven by factors like population numbers are changing, people who are reaching a voting age would also be changing, and therefore how that influenced the formula that would have been published by the Minister of Cooperative Governance, and therefore the number of wards are going to change.
All right. For instance, a student studying in Johannesburg, but they come from KZN, and they're going to study to be a doctor, Konalap at Johannesburg, for the next 7 years. It is therefore in their best interest to vote in the area where they live in. They'll get to enjoy the benefits of their vote. Now this all makes sense to me.
Because there are always changes, there are demographic changes through urbanization, there are changes through retrenchment. I mean, if you look at the impact of the decline of the mining industry in Gauteng and the impact that has had on people locating in towns in the Eastern Cape or around towns in the Eastern Cape, it's been severe. So you need to continuously re-evaluate the capacity of municipalities to deliver services in the context in which they find themselves at that point. The capacity could change over a period of a year, 2 years, and things like that, because of the demand and the needs that change and things like that.
There's a migration, for example, of people. There are people movements across the country. There are changes in population numbers through the country. The census would indicate that those are some of the data that you have to obtain from Stats SA regarding the changes that take place.
Okay, so now does this mean the outer boundaries can change, right? Pella, that's if I've been listening closely enough. Yeah.
The space doesn't change. A municipality remains within the same boundaries. If it was so many square kilometers, it would remain the same. But if the number of wards change, it means that you have to mess up with the existing wards in order to create 2 additional wards if there needs to be 2 more. You have to mess some boundaries up in order to accommodate the new wards that have to be created.
So, I can see how amalgamation can cause a problem for certain communities. Kodwa, can a split really cause tension and a dispute in communities?
If you have amalgamations, you would have what used to be an area that used to contain 2 municipalities now becoming 1 municipality.
Huluna bo mmele bontate. Ha re tsietseng bana ba sentse ba le teng ba etsa mosebetsi. Mme re ba tsetele mono le ho ba tsietsa mono hobane ba sentse ba tseba mosebetsi. Re ske ra tlo kgetha batho ba batjha ba sa tsebeng letho. Mme mona ha wa tlelwa papadi. Ho tletse o tla haua hore re tle re fumane boiketlo bohle ba teng kwana.
Boundaries are spatial creations within which not only voting take place, but municipalities use these spaces like the wards for planning purposes, service delivery planning. Sometimes, as people would say, oh, I live in a ward where I knew that I was next in line for the housing development, for the RDP houses, for example. I knew our village was next in line for water reticulation. But when the boundary changes, then I found myself in a different ward. Then my positioning for resources change, and they find this to be very destructive. It depends on the dynamics. For example, with the latest redeterminations, there is an area in Limpopo where the board is very much against the trend that we have seen of amalgamations, where we are redetermining to create a new municipality in a particular area. And that is when you study the dynamics on the ground. And in that particular case, a good example where you find that the area that houses, or a district municipality that houses 1.3 million people would be governed through only 3 municipalities. as opposed to other district municipalities of that size in the country with a population of 1.3 million would not have less than 6 local municipalities. It already tells you that you've taken the citizens and the electorate very far from government, meaning that the wards will become very large. The political representatives would be taking care of a huge number of people. In a ward, you find that one ward councillor is taking care of over 15,000 people, close to 20,000 people, and yet on the average, a ward councillor would be taking care of 5,000, 3,000 people. Now, that is the distance. The more that you enlarge the distance between the citizens and their political representatives, the people who should represent their needs within municipalities, that becomes a recipe for disaster.
Now, I think there should be a lot of backlash and discontent when the MDB publishes its final boundaries. But is the board ever prepared for these kind of things whenever they happen?
It's not about how we stop the protests when people receive the information on our final decisions. It's about continuously investing in making it possible for them to understand what are the ingredients that go into the processing and finally the decision making that we arrive at as a board in terms of boundaries. That is what they need to know, so that whenever someone goes up into the street and say, I'm not happy with this decision, they should do so, knowing quite well the process that was followed, the formula that was utilized, the factors that were taken into consideration. And once they know that, they would know that, by the way, key two elements that informed this decision was about me, to make sure that wherever I am, I get the best services out of government. Taxpayers get good value for money, and citizens are given the best benefit, irrespective of who becomes my neighbor. I should care less about who becomes my neighbor, but whether I'm going to get good service.
This is what I'm beginning to understand. Amalgamating and separating of municipalities does not equate to political interference, but this is what it means. Each community that is affected by the changes can somewhat benefit from the changes. You see, what the MDB is really trying to do is this. They want to ensure that each municipality has proper representation when it comes to ward councillors and registered voters. And this is a contentious issue. Even political parties tend to overlook at the reason as to why there has to be a process of redetermination before local government elections. It seems to me the MDB's work crosses over to redressing the socio-economic legacy left behind by the apartheid regime. And this cannot be easy on the chairperson and her team.
I wish we could be able to create something that's that's long-lasting for ourselves and for our children. In the past, I learned about the regions in South Africa and North Transvaal, whatnot, and we knew that we had no input in creating those. But today we are saying we're in a democracy. We are the ones creating these boundaries. So people should take an active role in crafting their awards. Look at the criteria. Take part in meetings that the board convene in order to make sure that these boundaries are crafted by them, both ward boundaries and delimitation boundaries.
Right. We've just heard from the chairperson and her team. But I think it's only about right that I summarize everything for everybody so that it's nice and simple for Tina Sonke. Well, it goes like this. It's really simple. The board is responsible for the determination and the redetermination of the municipal boundaries and the ward delimitation. Let's start by explaining a few of these terms, such as the word delimitation and the word redetermination. Firstly, what is a ward? To explain this, we first have to understand what a municipality is precisely. A municipality is a geographical area, call it a town or a metro. And every town or metropolitan area has a local government comprised of councillors. Without councillors, then how would a municipality function? Imagine the chaos no service delivery. The rubbish piles up, and you open it up, and no water comes out. The list is endless, and it's all terrifying, really. Anyway, let's get back to understanding what a ward really is. Take Gauteng, for instance. The geographical area that is outlined here as a piece of South Africa is a province of Gauteng. Gauteng, the province, is then further divided into smaller fragments, indicated here on this map. These are the municipalities in this province. Okay, now let's zoom in on one of these municipalities. This is the Ekurhuleni municipality, and all the numbered and color-coded areas that you are looking at on this map are the different wards in this municipality. The municipal wards are smaller geographical areas that form the greater municipality of Ekurhuleni. The question is, what does all of this have to do with the common man on the street like myself? It all boils down to governance and proportional representation. This means that if you are a registered voter of South Africa and are a permanent resident of this country, the work of the MDB affects you directly. What I mean by all this is, you, the registered voter on the IEC voters roll of South Africa, vote for a party and a councillor of your choosing at the time of local elections, right? The purpose of electing a person in a ward is to mandate that person to represent you in that particular ward, in your particular municipal council. For this to happen, the MDB has to segment each geographical municipality into wards by using a formula that ensures that the number of citizens in each ward and voting districts are equally segmented and are not varied by more than 15% from the norm. For example, the segmentation of municipalities with 30,000 voters and 10 wards will work something like this. 30,000 voters divided by 10 wards, which will equal to 3,000 voters per ward in the municipality with 10 wards and 30,000 voters. The 15% leeway I spoke of earlier means that because of all these variables that need to be considered in this process, it is impossible to land the amount of voters in each ward at this mathematical sweet spot. So, to compensate for this, there's an allowance of an additional 15% more voters in one district, which would mean 15% less in one of the districts, meaning that one of the districts can have up to but not more than 15% of the 30,000 voters, which comes up to 3,450, or no less than 15%, which comes up to 2,550. But the scales always have to even out. In a nutshell, a ward is a basic geographic area used for voting purposes within a municipal area. And this ward will have representation in the municipal council, as the people living in that ward would have voted for their representative, their local councillor. I'm a good citizen. I vote, I pay my taxes, but I never thought how important it is to know about this stuff. So, if the MDB puts out notices asking us to come to meetings which are about the process of ward delimitation and municipal boundaries redetermination and such, I suggest that you take note and take the right course of action, because this impacts your life directly. Now, I can't have the final say in all of this. So, let's pull up the chairperson and hear what she has to say for the last time.
I see this as a starting point that we owe it to the country to reduce this mandate, that it looks big, but we need to take it to the lowest level of primary education. How could a primary education child relate to boundaries, up to how an ordinary my mother, 70, 80, 90-year-old would relate to boundaries. Not only relating to that, but how all of us, different ages, different racial groups and different ethnic and tribal affiliated people could stand on the same level, see our past, see where we are, and work together where we want to go in terms of, how we would add value to the bigger vision of the country in terms of the National Development Program.